HarperCollins presents A Daughter's Courage by Kitty Neale. Read by Annie Aldington. Chapter 1. Battersea, London, 1956. Crimson nail polish was the only splash of colour in the dank kitchen, as Dorothy Butler painted her nails in preparation for her date with Robbie Ferguson. It was mid-September, and she was sitting at the battered kitchen table. While waiting for the varnish to dry, she watched as her mother Alice flicked soapy suds from her hands before wiping them down the front of her washed-out apron. Now 22 years old, Dorothy had been a child when her father returned from fighting in France, a broken man, unable to resume his work as a groundsman in Battersea Park. Since then, with only a small army disability pension to live on, her mother had taken in washing, which helped to pay the rent and buy the coal needed to warm the house during the long winter months. It was all Alice could manage, as her fear of going outside kept her a prisoner in her own home. However, constantly leaning over the sink and scrubbing clothes had damaged her back, and Dorothy saw her grimace as she stirred the 3 cups of tea she'd just made. Dorothy winced at the sight of her mum's hands. They looked blistered, red raw, and she wished she could do more to ease her burdens. Her own job as a baker's assistant didn't pay well, and though they had sufficient to eat, there was only just enough money left to pay the bills. "Dotty, be a love and take this cuppa through to your father, will you?" Alice asked. Dotty blew on her freshly polished nails, hoping they were dry, as she obligingly took the weak tea which had seen the leaves stewed 3 times. She carried it through to the sparsely furnished front room. She wasn't surprised to find her father Bill in his usual place, sat on a faded brown wing-backed armchair, staring up at the bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling rose. Dorothy knew that her mother didn't believe in luxuries, neither could she afford them. If it wasn't practical, or didn't serve a purpose, then it wasn't needed, and lampshades came under the latter heading. "Here you are, Dad," Dorothy said gently, as she knelt next to her father's chair. "I've brought you a nice cuppa." She studied her father's pale face. His skin was almost translucent and etched with lines. He had an especially deep furrow across his brow, which Dorothy thought had been caused by a constant frown. He looked in a permanent state of anguish, and rarely spoke or acknowledged anyone. She wondered if her father even knew who she was. It had broken Dorothy's heart when she'd first seen him in this state, but it was something she'd now become accustomed to. Having got no response from her father, she returned to the kitchen, where her mother was putting some freshly washed clothes through the mangle. For the umpteenth time she tried again to challenge her. "Mum, why won't you let Dr. Stubbs get some treatment for Dad? He's not getting any better, and this has been going on for over 11 years now. It's pretty obvious that he's out of his mind." Alice wiped her forehead with the back of a ravaged hand as she turned to look at her daughter. Her greying hair was held in a loose bun with thin strands hanging scraggily down. Though only in her 40s, the hard life she'd been forced to live had prematurely aged her, and she said wearily, "I've been through this with you before, Dotty. I won't have your father put in one of them places, 'cause you know what they do to 'em in there. They electrocute them. He just needs lots of love and patience from his family. You'll see. One day we'll have your Dad back to how he was. But if he goes into that nut house, that'll be the last we ever see of him." "What if you're wrong, Mum? What if he never gets better?" "He will, love. You know that Mrs. Brigade, the woman from up Lavender Hill with the 9 boys all with ginger hair? Well, I saw her the other day in the haberdashery shop. She told me that 3 of her sons had come home from the war as very changed young men, and it took years to get back to normal. The point is, they did eventually, and remember they're a lot younger than your father, so of course they'd get better quicker. But mark my words, girl,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?